This week on SnarkSquad Pod, we're joined by Amanda McLaughlin to talk about Season 1 of American Gods. Welcome back to SnarkSquad Pod. My name is Marines.
My name is Nicole Sweeney, and we are joined this week by dear friend Amanda.
Hey, I'm Amanda McLaughlin. I am a podcaster and the creator of Multitude, which is a podcast collective of shows that are enthusiastic but still critical about stuff that we love, like mythology, which is the reason that I'm here today.
It's true. It's true. I have wanted to have an excuse to ask Amanda to be on the podcast forever. And then once we decided we were doing American Gods, I was like, yes, this is it. This is the moment.
Well, the thing is that I co-host a show called Spirits about mythology and folklore, but the whole gambit is that I don't know anything about mythology and folklore. So the whole point is that true. My best friend from kindergarten knows mythology and religious studies very well, and I am just there to like make a lot of jokes and chill. But over the course of 3.5 years, I have picked up some stuff. So I like to talk about it in any case.
That's the thing. I feel like after several years of this, like you're now, like I know your role is to be the one who doesn't know anything, but like you make very good guesses. You're right quite often. So I don't know.
And I'm a huge fan of the book series, of the book and the TV series.
Well, speaking of being a huge fan of the book and TV series, before we started recording, I was joking about how terrible my synopsis is going to be and how like that's part of my brand on the podcast now is just being bad at the synopsis. And Amanda graciously offered to give it a try herself. So, and like, you know, never one to pass up a golden opportunity like this. I'm going to give it back to Amanda to give us a plot synopsis of Season 1 of American Gods.
Certainly. So we meet our protagonist, Shadow Moon, in prison when he is to be released in about 5 days' time. Unfortunately, his wife dies tragically just 4 days before he's meant to get out. So he is sort of like foisted into the world, unprepared, grieving, unsure where to go. And in the airport meets an old man who's running a grift on the ticket sales agent. And, you know, grift recognized grift. And when Shadow gets onto the plane, he is mysteriously promoted into first class, where he ends up meeting Mr. Wednesday, who we learn over the course of the next couple episodes. He kind of brings Shadow on to drive him around, ask no questions, to be an enforcer and a bodyguard, and kind of put his skills to use. And Shadow is sort of immediately thrust into the world that he doesn't understand, where he's sort of like, wait, are you magic? Wait, do you have powers? Wait, are you a god maybe? And over the course of this little road trip, Wednesday is recruiting gods to fight on his side in a war that is coming. And Shadow gets wrapped up in that war.
Yeah. That is Season 1 of American Gods. Very good. That was way better. Already. I just, the second you, how concisely you led with, here's the inciting incident. You didn't have a 5-paragraph essay for that. So, much better.
Well, you know, I tried Marvel style to keep it to 60 seconds. That was my goal.
Yes.
And trust me, I will go on at length for the rest of the episode about all of the silly details that I really love. But so don't expect that level of commentary every time I open my mouth, please.
Well, I feel like we just got a little bit of a spoiler answer to our first question, and we always start with, did you like it? But I'm sensing, Amanda, that you did like this.
I did. And when he said spoiler, I was like, oh my God, wait, I thought this was a spoil cast. Okay, it is. We're safe.
Yes.
But
Spoil away.
I loved it. I read American Gods when I was like 13. And it was really a formative book in my life. And I love Brian Fuller. I loved Hannibal. That was a really formative piece of TV in my life, which came out when I was in college and really needed some like queer Baroque, like, you know, the culture loving TV show to really make me care about TV in the way that a lot of us have done over the kind of golden age of TV that's happening. But yes, I liked it a lot. I am really excited for the second season, though I think I'm going to wait until they're all out to watch them all at once because I cannot take suspense. And so I really just wanted to watch them all in a row.
Yeah, this is a show that feels like very much made for binging. I think the intense sensory experience of this show makes it very well suited for just like plopping down on the couch for, 8 hours and just letting it wash over you. I also loved this show. I read the book last year, I think, for the first time. I listened to it on audiobook, and it was super fantastic as an audiobook because it's a full cast, and I highly recommend that experience to anybody. I don't know, whatever. We're not talking about the book, but it was great. I found it really interesting how well they adapted the spirit of the thing while changing a lot of details. And I think that's probably something we'll talk about a little bit more, but I loved the show. I thought it was great.
I read this book this year, so pretty recently, even though my memories of the thing probably aren't great because there's so much here to consume and there's a lot of lore, obviously. So I really had a great experience reading it. I also listened to the full cast audiobook, which I will +1 that recommendation. And so I read the book for not content and just for myself, which is wild these days.
Yeah,
but then
who are you?
Yeah, I know. I know. But then soon after I was like, the TV show, Nicole, are we doing this? So it became content really quickly. But yeah, I really enjoyed the book and I love the TV show adaptation as well. I think that I can look at the show and see why it probably wouldn't be for everyone because there is an amount of just extra that the show is it really goes ham in on some of the visual stuff and the storytelling, and I can see why somebody might not enjoy that, but I just found the experience really entertaining. I thought it was wonderful. I loved looking at it. I loved experiencing the story and kind of thinking about it. I loved all of the characters for the most part, and so yeah, I am really excited to talk about this, and I think I want to start with the adaptation piece of it, just to kind of get it out of the way. We're not going to talk about the book, but how this worked as an adaptation and the changes that they made that you liked or didn't like.
Well, I really love adaptations that don't try to be a carbon copy of each other. I like an adaptation that feels like the medium that it is. And I love that this TV show is so visual in a way that books just can't be. And I think it also really drops you into a world that takes a longer amount of time to unfold in the novel. But in a 500-page novel or whatever it is, you have a little bit of time to really fall into it. But this feels like from the moment Shadow is in prison and goes to sleep in minute 6 of the first episode, he kind of daydreams and sees his wife. And so right away, it's surrealist. It is involved in people's sort of inner lives and their emotions. And there's this whole thing set up from the beginning of what you see is not necessarily what you're getting, and what's going on in your brain can impact the world around you. And it's just oh, okay, well, there is my entire series motif. Thank you. And I just, I love it. I love it. I love how Baroque it is. I like so much that Brian Fuller was chosen for this, because if you're making a show about gods, you're going to go for it, and no one goes for it harder than Brian Fuller.
Yes, the show goes for it. I think that's the most concise way to explain the feeling of the thing. I totally agree. The way that the show leans into the fact that this is a visual experience that you are having. I watched the show with a friend who had not read the books, with two friends, one who had read the book and one who hadn't. And it was interesting, the things that my friend who hadn't read the book was guessing, and the way that she was guessing those things, she figured out who Mr. Wednesday was fairly early on, which I get it, because the show tips its hand, I think, much more so than the book did. Also, I'm just slow, so when I'm reading the book, I was like, wow, that's who he was.
Yeah, my favorite thing is watching Chopped or Beat Bobby Flay, and I'm getting from these very obvious editorial cues that this person's going home, and I just feel like such a detective. I love it so much.
Yeah, I am often very bad at making those kinds of guesses, so it was fun to hear from somebody who was effectively making those guesses. But it was also interesting to talk to her about that. The fact that the show reveals that he's Odin, or teases that he's Odin so much earlier than I think the book did, makes sense, again, because of how visual it is. And so I don't know how to articulate this correctly, but it was interesting to have the experience of watching it with this friend, because I could see all of the ways in which changes were being made to suit to suit the medium, and it was like really just lovely and magical to watch.
I'm similar in that I think that for an adaptation, I want it to be adding something to what the story is. And I think that this very effectively went, okay, we're doing a visual thing, and it did the visual thing, and it's really interesting because in the book, I think that TV Shadow is a lot more reactionary and emotional than book Shadow is. Like his whole thing in the book was kind of being a little drier and maybe not questioning as much. But I think it makes sense to have him a little more reactionary. One, because the actor has the best what the fuck faces ever.
So good.
God, so beautiful, so confused.
So confused, so beautiful. But also like, that whole idea of like what you see isn't what you get. We're seeing it alongside him too. So it makes sense to have a little bit more of an emotional entry point through him and to kind of experience that alongside him. So I really appreciated kind of getting to see it that way because it wasn't something that I had the chance to experience while I was listening and reading.
Yeah, I know we're talking about it as an adaptation, but like brief pause to acknowledge just how wonderful Ricky Whittle is as Shadow. I just like he's just so great. He's so wonderful.
Yeah, he really carries so much of this because, his character is taking us into this world and is experiencing with the viewer these wild shenanigans and these miracles happening in front of him, and the conflict and like the killing and the violence and the fact that none of this makes any sense. And so I feel like if you don't have a strong relationship to or feel like that main person is like a conduit for you, then it could be kind of alienating and strange to the viewer or feel patronizing. But I think it really strikes a really good sort of tonal balance where he is like adapting to the world around him, but still points out when things are super unexpected, and it sort of lets the audience, like fall into that world and suspend disbelief a little bit, but still feel like this is realistically like unfolding around a real person.
Yes.
And I really bought everything like that he was involved in, like in jail for a few months, being recruited by Odin, basically, to be his right-hand man, experiencing and all of these things and processing the way that it all felt really believable coming from him. And I think it's a credit to the actor that he sold all of these different facets of Shadow's character that, we run the gamut with him, believing that he is so sought after. All of these gods really want to know what his role is in all of this, but also like the low man on the totem pole, at least in terms of like knowledge, like he has no idea what's going on. And I think he conveys that sense really well too. So, and did we mention that he's really beautiful? I'm sorry to be the Shadow one, but
so beautiful.
No, but
so confused.
he's so beautiful.
We'd be like lying if we didn't acknowledge
and in a suit
it
for most of it, which yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this beautiful man in a suit for an extended. Although there was like an early scene where it's when he wakes up in Mr. Wednesday's car after like the bar thing. I was struck by how fucking clean that shirt was. I was like, this is not. Look, I know he's like magical, but
shirts get dirty.
Yeah, shirts get dirty. Going back to this as an adaptation, I'm curious how you guys felt about changes that they made to his wife's plot line, like the subtle tweaks. I mean, they gave her more of a plot, I guess. Right. I'm asking because I have mixed feelings and I want to process them.
I think I had mixed feelings as well. I think that, so my reaction to Laura in the book was mostly negative, but like in the way that it was supposed to be, right? So you find out at the very beginning that Laura dies in a car crash because she is giving like a blowjob to Shadow's best friend, basically. So she's been cheating for a long time and they get into a car accident and she dies. So Shadow finds out that she's dead and that she has been unfaithful while he was in jail, like kind of all at once. So you're supposed to, because Shadow is your emotional entry into the story, obviously like that storyline also is a hit to the reader. And you're like, well, that sucks. So that's kind of where you land with Laura in the story. By expanding her story in the TV show, I think that they start to want to get you over to Laura's side, and they give her a little bit more backstory, and they give her a ton more to do. And so it was hard for me to get over those feelings of like, yeah, but you hurt Shadow, don't, dislike, and to try and like see it from the way that the show was trying to give it to us, which was, I think that, obviously Laura was dealing with something that looked a lot like depression. She attempted suicide at one point, and she was not dealing with these feelings or these things well. And I think that bled into her relationship with Shadow. And then she comes back after she dies. She comes back from the dead, and she kind of has a clearer view on her own life and her relationship with Shadow. So you start kind of getting over to her side. So it was the constant balance between what she did in the past or at the beginning of the story and the character growth for her as the story went along. And I don't know where I landed. I think more positive at the end because of that like final moment where she's, risking literal life and limb to get to Shadow and to, protect him and to communicate the pieces of information that she's received and whatnot. So I don't know, man. I think I want to hear what you guys have to say, but in the larger context too of all of the women characters and how the show treats them, because I think a big critique of American Gods, the book, is that the women that are present don't have much to do. And the show definitely gives everybody more to do, but it very visibly expands the women characters in the show. So in the larger context, I kind of want to come back to the other women as well. But did you guys end up more positive or more negative on Laura?
That's a really interesting way of putting it. And I was conflicted. I didn't have quite as strong negative feelings towards Laura when I was reading the book. I definitely remember that initial wow, that fucking sucks. But it felt to me like because she's dead for the entire book, the character of dead Laura Moon is somehow fundamentally different than alive Laura Moon, which also seems to be true in the show. And so to me, I don't know, I was alive Laura Moon, clearly that sucked, but ghost zombie whatever Laura Moon throughout the book, I didn't have quite the same strong negative feelings for, but something about the flashbacks on the show, the way the show portrayed alive Laura Moon unsettled me. And it left me very, I don't know, uncomfortable, the way that they were dealing with this idea of her depression, but not really, I don't know, dealing with it, but not dealing with it. I think it left me unsettled and a little bit uncertain. But I absolutely agree that I think that on balance in the end, I had very strong positive feelings for zombie Laura Moon and her great quest to protect our precious child Shadow. So I don't know. I'm still torn, but I guess good. Ooh.
Yeah, I very much am in line with both of you. Man, I feel like podcasts with great disagreement might be more more saucy, but no, I feel similarly where I actually forgot completely about her presence in the novel. And when the show originally aired, I went back to the novel and was like, wait, was she here? Because and I felt bad immediately upon realizing that, yeah, I just completely forgot about it. Because when I think of American Gods, the novel, I think of Shadow and Wednesday in a car figuring stuff out. Right. And so I liked how vibrantly she was portrayed by Emily Browning. And that performance, when I think about the TV show, is one of the things I think about. I think about the Coming to America interludes. I think about Laura. And I think about, I guess, Kristen Chenoweth in that wig. But it was
naturally.
It was really compelling. And I agree with you, Nicole, around some of the it feels like her lifetime portrayal was just sort of life sucks sometimes, right? And it felt weird. Were they trying to place blame on her for what had happened? Are they trying to just say hey, life happens to you sometimes, and no matter what, you make the choices you make, and sometimes it doesn't work out? I'm not quite sure, but having her have so much agency in death, I thought was really fascinating. And it's not just this drive, like a mom picking up a car when her kids are in danger, like superhuman love will save us all, like Lily Potter style thing. It's like she has a mission, and she has an interesting way of like moving through the world, encountering new information, bringing stuff up for the viewer that we haven't seen before. She's not just kind of like an accessory or like a long distance, like, I don't know, magnet, like moving its way closer to Shadow.
I think that it would have been easier to process feelings about Laura if the message of those like flashbacks and alive Laura were clear. And I think that that's kind of what we're all saying, is that we weren't sure what those flashbacks were trying to get out exactly. If it was supposed to give us more of like better feelings toward Laura, but you really didn't need that because her growth as a character as zombie Laura Moon really did that for you. That's the part where you get more emotionally attached to her and you see what she's all about. So you almost didn't need that backstory. Or if you had it there, I don't know, I just don't understand what they were trying to do. And that's kind of where all of my, I don't know, feelings are really coming from. But yes, Nicole, zombie on, we're good.
I, in general, have a bit of an aversion to time jumps. If we're moving back and forth in time in the story, it is really important for me to feel like there's a purpose and like there's a clear reason why we've left the timeline. And I think that, like, to echo what has already been said, like not having a clear sense of the purpose also added to the sense of like I'm not knowing what we were doing with all of that.
I think the point may have been that she has a lot to make up for in terms of things she wants to accomplish, and ways she wants to like change her life and her destiny. So that, to me, that was my read on it first, is like, well, she's dead now. She's literally decaying. She's on a limited clock even after her first clock's worth of life ran out. And she is like highly motivated to make a difference and to like make an impact on the world.
Yeah, that tracks. I am still a little bit uneasy in terms of how effectively I think that was done, but yes, that feels like a plausible reason for why we were doing all of that.
I literally have like 20 million directions that I want to go ahead from here.
Yes.
Because you mentioned the Coming to America, and like I want to talk more of the cast, but very quickly, I don't know if you guys had feelings about the Queen of Sheba or about Astara, who were the other two. Oh, I guess in media as well. Those were like the three other main female characters who I think all got more to do in the show than in the books. Did you have any feelings about any of those portrayals?
I mean, every time media was on screen, it was beautiful and wonderful and perfect.
This is true.
That's like my whole feelings about media as a character. It's just like, yes, great. Thank you for this gift.
Totally agree.
I didn't know that Kirsten Chenoweth was even in this, and I just still love her from Pushing Daisy's days. So as soon as she showed up as Easter, I was like delighted, absolutely delighted. And she really hadn't done anything except for smile at me at that point, and I was like, yes, love it. Keep doing it.
I think Bilquis is great as well. I like her story, and I like that she also had a little bit more like infrastructure around her than just as an individual god.
It seems that like they're building it up. Like both Bilquis and Astara seem like they'll have big roles to play in like the upcoming war or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so they've set a lot of that up, which I think is interesting with the famine. And the last thing we see of Bilquis is her kind of arriving to like the big showdown place or whatnot, which, that's one of the ways that the adaptation, I think, made a smart decision in terms of like expanding all of these characters, like their backstories, but also just giving the women more to do.
Yeah, and putting them in a little earlier. That's something else I liked about the writing of the series is the book feels very much like, it is like it's sequential. It's a road trip. Like you're passing through and meeting each god on your way to the next. But this made sort of an ensemble come together by the end of just whatever it was, like 6 or 7 episodes, which I thought was really impressive.
Yeah, I liked the fact that it felt like an ensemble sort of through and through. I think it would be very easy to make this feel like doing this as a TV show. I think it would have been easy to turn this into, and this week we're doing this god,
right.
but it felt very cohesive
Nicole, earlier you mentioned not liking time jumps, and Amanda already mentioned like the coming to America stories. So part of that, like not being sequential and feeling a lot like the ensemble piece of it, were those little prologues. I think we got them consistently for the first 4 episodes, and then we saw them in bits and pieces throughout. So some of the episodes had these little prologues about how certain gods made their way over to America, basically, through the people and the beliefs that brought them. So how did you guys feel about those prologues, and are there any that stuck out to you?
I mean, I loved them. Just like, so I did complain about time jumps, but those I thought were great. In part because they had a clear purpose, you know, like they fit well. I understood what they were doing in terms of setting up the world and like the ideas of the story. So they were like clearly very functional. So it didn't bother me in the way that I think a lot of the, you know, Laura Moon time jumps did.
I love an interstitial, and I love a like framing device. So I was already set up to like these a lot, and I have a huge interest in personal mythologies, in mythologies of immigration, whether forced or voluntary. And I like especially that the first of the coming to America narratives of the Norse war god, it shows very quickly and very memorably that America was not blank when people got there, and that from the beginning, the sort of like whole thesis of American gods and what is an American god, whose gods are American, which ones have stayed and which ones left. It was a war from the beginning, because like that is what the like colonizers made it become. So I just like that they sort of resisted that easy narrative of saying like, oh well, you know, melting pot, lots of people, we all come together, we all coexist, and like that. Well, okay, and that's the national project. Right. So it was more complex and more real from the beginning.
I think a lot of them were really visceral, and they had some, especially because of all of the like immigration tied to it, and just that entire idea of like bringing over of beliefs. I think that the S.C. McGowan one really stuck with me because of the way that she upheld her belief, and then you see at the very end of her life her trying to pass that on to her grandkids, and like she literally the grandkid literally starts crying, and she has to stop telling her story. So the idea of like where along the lines, you know, those stories stop getting passed along, I think really hit close to home, because as a first generation American, thinking about like the stories and the lore that were taught to me versus, you know, what I internalize, what I believe, and what I will eventually pass to any hypothetical children, like that really like set it in a frame where I could apply and think about it in my own life. So I don't know, it was just very, very interesting to me and very moving. And the other one that really stuck out to me was the one of the taxi driver, the Jinn. There was a ton of like nudity in this series as a whole, and a lot of gore too as well. But that entire like scene was like an extended sex scene, and I was like, what are we doing? Like it just kept going on and on and on. But you know, interestingly enough, like I was wondering what the I don't know. I was just like wondering what the show was getting at there. But we do see the character pop up again, and I didn't expect him to. So the one who becomes eventually the taxi driver, he's looking for the Jinn again. And so when he showed back up later on, not that it really explains why we got this like basically porn scene in the middle of or in the beginning of the episode, but I don't know, it was a really neat thing, because a lot of these other stories, you kind of get them one and done and they move on. But this is a character that we see come back up again, which I really liked a lot.
I actually have a fan portrait of this Jinn taxi driver in my house. I'm looking at it right now. And he has blue skin. I'll send you guys. I'll send y'all a picture you can include in the show notes. But yeah, that's like big fandom, and he's like tattooed and muscly and kind of like, you know, big sunglasses. And when I first put that up in my house growing up, my mom was like, "No, this is not going in my house." So it's the first thing that I hung up when I got an apartment.
You can't stop me now, Mom.
I mentioned the nudity and the gore and whatnot. And I mean, it was all over the place, from some of the early scenes, like having Laura Moon like kick a guy in the groin and then basically split him in half. And then you have that scene of her like walking down the street holding her own arm and like super bloody and gross. And then on the nudity side of it, there's like full frontal male nudity in pretty much every episode, I would say. I don't know if I'm just exaggerating that in my memory, which is you don't see often. You usually get a lot more female nudity than male nudity. But I don't know, I guess, is this more of like the show going ham? Was it extra to you? How did you kind of process all of that nudity and gore?
Every choice that the show made felt like, what is the extreme sensory experience we can give you now? Like in order to advance this story. Right. And so in that way, the way that the show used bodies also felt like very much a part of that. And even the gore, like the bits that were gory were also weirdly beautiful. Like that bit where she kicks the guy in the groin, whatever. There's like slow motion, like blood rain also. So I don't know. All of it was, in addition to there being like a lot of gore and a lot of nudity, it was like very fantastically and beautifully captured too. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it was never distracting. It was never like, why? It fit.
Yeah, I love how it fit thematically, because we joke on Spirits that like no matter if we're telling like a lighthearted love story, we always end up talking about death, and it's sort of an occupational hazard, because when you talk about mythology and folklore, like there's a reason that these stories are so central to human beings, and so much of what I love about American Gods, the show, the book, just the story, is that it is about the stories we tell ourselves. It's about the beliefs we bring with it's about the beliefs we bring with us. It's about why and how we like perpetuate the stuff that we're taught. So I really liked that the bodies, like you said, were so like centered, and mythology is serious. Like we're talking about wars of gods. And so to see violence, to see blood, to see bodies, to see, like the I don't know if anyone throws up, but the kind of bodily functions I thought was really kind of poetic, and very Brian Fuller move to make blood look like a like beautiful modernist painting, which I appreciate too, because I have so many complex feelings about like true crime and the depiction of violence on TV, and it makes me really aware of like why we're seeing this and what purpose it's serving. Whereas I feel more like, I don't know, if I'm like in the middle of Game of Thrones or something, I'll look up and be like, why am I watching this battle? Like, what does this mean? But I felt like everything had meaning and purpose, and then that it's just on like an epic scale. So to me, it made sense that you would kind of cross normal boundaries of like taste, because there isn't room for taste when we're talking about like, belief and fate and faith and death and all this stuff.
I think my favorite instance of like processing how the show was using like the violence and the gore and the bodies or whatnot is when Laura, after a car accident, she like busts at the seams basically. And so you're seeing like her rib cage, you're seeing her insides. And so Mad Sweeney brings her back. She's temporarily dead again, and she comes back to life, and she puts her jacket on and she's like, don't look at me. It's like her insides. And I don't know, there was something about like having seen her, the actress or Laura already like naked in other scenes, but right now like her insides are showing, and she's like, no, don't look at me. I thought it was like, I don't know, that moment really stuck out to me about like what the show was doing and the way that it did fit thematically and visually. And even though it was kind of sensational, it never really felt sensationalized for some reason. It just like really fit into the world. And this entire idea, this is a story about gods against gods, but at the very heart of it is a human, and this entire idea that these gods live and die by humans and their belief. And so to see kind of like the blood and guts and nudity, that's all very human. And to see that kind of centered in the story, I think was important.
And what a contrast to the New Gods, right? Like just think of the sort of very sterile, like LED lit limo and room that we encounter, all the New Gods in. It's just such a clear like visual storytelling between, oh hey, the old and the new, like the disordered and the ordered, the gross and human and fleshy and smelly, and like the pristine, and it wants us to lean a certain way, like obviously I think the show is telling us, hey, we cannot just totally leap behind our past here. But I like, especially paging through, I just like kind of paged through a wiki of all the different characters to refresh my memory before this recording, and I was like, oh wait, yeah, every new god is pictured against like a stark white background.
Yeah.
And even to this point about bodies, so like aside from the actual named gods themselves, like the gods had a bunch of sort of minion type characters, and they were like the most neutral bodies possible. Again, like very sterile and like nothing. Like they had blank faces, and that contrast was very, very pronounced.
Nothing creepier than a blank face.
Yes.
I really don't like that trope.
Nope. The true stuff of nightmares. I have mentioned previously on the podcast that like gore, I often have a lot of problems with it. I didn't on this show, again, because of the way that it was shot. How fantastical it always was. I didn't find myself instinctively recoiling in the way that I usually do, but those blank-faced people, oh man, that was the stuff that was actually the hardest to look at.
Yeah, it's bad. We did an episode on clowns for Halloween 2018, and part of the reason that clowns are so scary, like sociologists and people sort of posit that it's because you can't recognize them, and they like distort features in a way that your brain is just like, nope. Bad.
So, Amanda, you mentioned a little bit about the contrast between the old gods and the new gods. And I think, maybe this is part of the adaptation piece of it as well, but I think the show is doing something different than the book in terms of how it's portraying the gods and kind of that divide between old and new. We see things like Vulcan, who is the volcano god, who then becomes like the gun god, basically, the weapons god. And that is how it's like modernized. He's modernized himself in the show. So I'm just curious about how you felt about these different representations and that divide between old and new gods.
The idea of a god rebranding, I think, is delightful. And like that, I don't recall that being a phenomenon in the book. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a while since I've read it. But I'm fairly certain that is like largely an invention of the show, and a really freaking clever one. I just like it. Like it makes sense given everything else that the story is saying about the way in which gods live and die by human belief. And so, as the times are changing, the gods have to rebrand. And I don't know, I thought that was a really like interesting choice.
Yeah, and I actually looked this up, and it was an experience that Neil Gaiman had in between the publishing of the book and the making of the TV show, where he like visited a town in Alabama and saw a statue of Vulcan, and then someone told him the story of like something similar where the factory had a lot of accidents, and it was cheaper for the company to pay out the damages to the families than to like repair the factory sufficiently to like get rid of all those risks.
Oh my God.
Which is horrifying. And just like, I don't know, like you can make this stuff up, but the fact that this wasn't made up is worse. But I mean, watching that scene in 2017 is just like gutting. And I really sort of appreciated the way in which like the sort of things that we think are that we should have left behind are still here and made more powerful. And it's like progress is not always good, and good stuff does not always mean progress. So anyway, I thought it was really like moving and made me feel uncomfortable in a really good way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that it was like all of the rebranding as a, media is kind of, and Technical Boy are kind of going hand in hand, proposing these ways for these gods to rebrand. And they're all really interesting and smart. So like Odin, his proposal is like a warhead, and Vulcan was the guns and like kind of that reaction that happens when you shoot a gun. And you see at one point the Queen of Sheba, that they're setting her up like on basically like a swipe left, swipe right, like Tinder kind of app. So there are things that I thought were just really smart in terms of like connecting something in our modern world with the idea of these gods. I think especially for people who maybe struggle with beliefs or don't have like beliefs, like the idea of like, why would somebody believe in a thing? They connected it to more a concept, I think, that like kind of really cemented the idea of some of these old gods, which is the point, right? Rebranding for a modern audience. I just thought that was so smart. And the Vulcan one, obviously, I keep mentioning it. It just really stuck with me because, of the time that we're living in and like the ferocity with which some people defend owning guns and, all of this stuff and just the violence that we constantly see. And this idea of people who are dying being sacrifices to a god, like all of that was just really, really thought-provoking. And it hit me really hard, that one.
Yeah, and I think it's also another example of like one of my favorite things about the story, which is like repeated behavior makes an object of worship. And even if you're not intentionally out to revive or to create a god, like repeated action is power, which is why I just thought it was so interesting that like Mr. World, for example, talks about like rugged individualism. And the media said, Gillian Anderson had a quote, "Time and attention is better than lamb's blood," to which I was like, oh no, I'm doing it. Like I'm feeding the machine. I'm part of it. Like you can't just opt out and you can't like ignore it and by ignoring it not take part. Where like this stuff is happening and to like instantiate this sort of like nebulous, like icky, like, oh, we're making things as a society that we don't understand and like social media is having an impact on us and we don't get it yet. To like make a literal god out of that just makes it so much easier to sort of look at what I do just in my like lived, reality and say like, what does this say about me? Like if I looked at my behavior from the outside, what does this say about me? And like, what am I supporting, creating, destroying, like in my habits that I'm not even intentionally, trying to do.
There's a line about media, I think says it, or somebody like speaking around media. They say something about how humans have like smaller screens so that they don't get bored looking at their bigger screens. And like, yes. I literally was just looking at my phone like maybe 5 seconds before. And I was like, wow, okay, drag me show. But like, actually, yes, it very much, I think, connecting both of those points, but like what Mari said about, even if you don't have belief, right? It's like watching this show as like, an atheist, there is still a ton of, the show is very clear that like I am not exempt, and in a really, really thoughtful and wonderful way. I think it's asking you to interrogate what you're doing and like be more conscientious about what you are devoting your time to. And like the idea of devoting your time as worship is just, it's just so good. It's like,
yes.
Yeah.
It makes it concrete, right there. This universe's definition of what belief and faith is, it gives it to you in a way that you can really process, whether it's talking about a leprechaun, which a lot of us can look at and go, ha ha ha, who would believe in leprechauns? But then it puts it up against like media and you're like, wow, I am looking at my phone while I'm watching this TV show. And I love that. I love that idea of like time and attention, going into things and setting that up against the older gods or whatnot.
This is a complete tangent, but I'm curious, was there anything in the pantheon that relates to something that either of you grew up with? Like traditions or the like actual gods or concepts?
When I listened to American Gods on audiobook, it was the 10th anniversary edition. So it had some like bonus features, which included a little bit of, I think it was at the end, where Neil Gaiman was talking about like the absence of Jesus in his stories and how he thought about including, or there was even like a bonus scene or whatnot where the show, there was like no Jesus represented in American Gods, which, talking about America, it's kind of like an important one here. And then the show kind of completely does include a lot of Jesus in it. You see him around Easter, and there's one of the Coming to America scenes where you end up with a very like the image of like a crucified Christ at the end there. So I mean, if we're talking about any sort of like belief, I know that this is not directly related to some of like Odin or leprechauns or anything like that, but yeah, that was my, as I like to say, my first fandom, and I grew up in a very Christian home. So the idea of there being multiple Jesuses based on like, because even that, like Christianity would treat it like a monolith, but it certainly is not. And so everybody's like personal take on that one story, and seeing that represented, I thought was really, really neat. And you have Spanish Jesus, and they're all like at the Easter gathering where they're all kind of just like walking around talking to each other, and they've all got almost like a hipster vibe to them. Just chef's kiss. Really, really cool.
I love that scene too.
Yeah, I don't know. My upbringing was tragically devoid of major myths.
But I think we are all in club, like, new media is always changing era of like making a living doing stuff online. So I almost had like a little flash forward, like watching the media scenes where I was like, is this what I'm going to tell my kids about? Like, what am I going to say? I think about that often, just in this like political environment. Like, what am I going to say about the process of like living through this, and will it have felt as impactful as it will become, or are we overblowing it because everybody thinks that they're living through the most important moment of history, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, no, I just, it really abstracts my thinking about like myself, my life, the world around me. And I think that's like, not only is the show so entertaining, but it also leaves me with those questions, and not in a way where it sort of like hits me over the head and is like, bye. But it sort of invites like engagement with thoughts of like historiosity and legacy and belief, and it's so hard to do that. Like, I can't believe that the show exists and accomplishes that, which I really love.
Yeah, the fact that it both like invites those questions, and like it invites those questions, it definitely has some sort of clear like perspectives. It favors the old gods to the new gods, but without, I think, being too aggressive in that idea. Like, it's, the show is obviously not telling you to like turn off your television and give up TV.
Oh shit, I didn't even think about that angle. Oh boy. Oh no. Oh, it goes so deep.
Right, but like because it's giving you the space to think about it more critically and more often, I guess, giving you new framing devices for how you think about it in your own life.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me because I think that, there is obviously a favoring of the old gods in terms of old versus new, but also the show doesn't really step away from the idea that the old gods are pretty fucked up too. And they mess with a lot of people's lives, and they're not interested always in, like, the final scene is basically to ensure their own survival. Easter basically creates like a mass famine, and it's basically like, pray to us and maybe we'll give you your food back. And a lot of Mad Sweeney's like backstory is about how leprechauns give and take or whatnot. So they're not necessarily like good. And it's just like, in contrast to the new gods, there's something a little bit more that the show is giving you like emotionally there. But the general idea is that all of these gods will mess up your life. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Whether that's Odin or if it's like media, or Mr. World is especially creepy, not only because Crispin Glover is like, I don't know, something about his face my brain just associates with like bad villain dude. But the entire idea of like, he's showing Shadow all of the information he's collected, that is a very present thing in our lives right now, is like, everybody is collecting our information. And this thing that we're going to put up and publish is going to live online probably forever. So like those kinds of things are captured in Mr. World which I think is really creepy. But yeah, none of these gods are particularly quote unquote good.
Yeah. Which is awesome to just think of them being embroiled in their own conflict, and especially in a world where many of them, like, they became gods because they dominated a society, a feeling, like a kind of like a vertical, if you will, of like different like sacrifices or needs. And so to have all of them like chucked together in an environment where there was like a paucity of belief and need is just like, it's just an awesome idea for a story. And like I can't get over it. And as a kid, like I wrote so many like baby novels that were just complete ripoffs of Narnia. And as I feel like if I had this text then, everything I wrote would just be like a total ripoff of American Gods, because I just love I'm so enamored with the concept. But a concept only good as the execution, I think. And this, I think, just having people be styled so differently, having like the music and the cinematography. I'm not like versed enough in those things to tell you specifically what really works for me, but I love that every god feels like they are in their own movie or like they are bringing their own, like musical theme throughout a musical. And they just feel so well established, even though like Mr. World, he's on screen for what, like 20 minutes, like it's very effective.
You mentioned Mad Sweeney, and I keep the couple times he's come up, I'm like, ooh, can we talk about him some more? Can we talk about him a little bit?
Yeah.
Just because I love him.
That's it. That's
it.
That's the thing.
That's the thing. That's what I wanted to say. I just wanted to work that in there somewhere. He is definitely one that like I liked him in the book. Probably, I think, I don't know. I don't really remember, but like him on the show, I just like with each scene that he was in, my appreciation for this character grew and grew. And then the moment where he brings Laura back, he has his coin, he has it, and he's like, no, I can't, I gotta let Laura keep on living her zombie life and go on her zombie journey for redemption or whatever. He's so good. I love him.
I also really loved him in a way that was completely surprising to me. Literally, after I finished the show, I sent Nicole a text message asking, "Did you love Mad Sweeney?" Because I was like, I do. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be having these feelings. And I don't know what it was about his particular like character growth and like emotional journey. But when I look back at this, I think that he's one of the things that really stands out to me, especially because I think he's a midway point. Right. And I think it exists in the same place that Zombie Laura does as well, that he's not quite a god. He's very much a pawn in this story, but he's something a little extra as well. And I think that, when you have Shadow and Laura and Mad Sweeney existing in that middle ground, it's easier, I think, to latch onto them and their emotional stories. So I didn't expect him to be kind of in that tier right along with Shadow and Laura, but he definitely was. And by the end, when he's standing up on the balcony and he's made it to the party and he's kind of looking smugly down, like, I'm so happy for him to be back and like reunited with these people. And I can't wait to see where his story goes. So that was definitely surprising for me.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I love this kind of idea of him being like a really down on his luck figure that is swept up in this world of the gods. Because he is like not a person with power. And even though he has this gift and this ability to like give life and luck, it feels like he is so struggling against circumstance. And so I like so much that he is not like a powerless thing swept up in the whole world, and he's not like a powerful god in charge of like his domain, but he's really very much like a human figure. And that just made me question like, wait, what is humanity? And like, why do I look for that in my characters? And it's just, he also resonated with me in a way that was really, really moving. And not just because I'm Irish, like my grandparents came to America under similar circumstances to the Prayer for Mad Sweeney episode. In it, not the whole plot line, but different ways. But that for me was a particularly nice thing, because I was told, like don't make the fairies mad and like leave out bread sometimes, and that those were things that resonated with my own background.
Just kind of going back about like resonating with your background, I don't know if this was a moment where I was being really slow with the story, or if it has to do with my like Christian-centric kind of viewing, but the entire time that Mad Sweeney is saying that he has a friends that can do resurrection and they're headed towards like Easter's house, I honestly thought it was going to be one of the Jesuses that was going to do the resurrection because that's what I associate. So when it was a star, I was like, oh, like I didn't even for once like make that connection. In my head, it was just a given that they were going to find like a Jesus or Jesus to do the resurrection thing. But no, it was an old god. It was, Easter, that whole thing. So it's funny how pieces of even your own background, even when you don't realize, kind of color how you're still viewing these stories and the gods.
Yeah, and like the absolute distillation of Irishness is Sweeney's, like, I think final quote in the episode, which is that the gods like to fuck with us. And I was just like, oh yeah, no, that's it. That's the whole culture. Yes.
Spirits podcast, a summary. The gods like to fuck with us.
The gods like to fuck is the tagline of Spirits.
And on that note, we'll wrap it up for this week. Thank you to Amanda for joining us, and thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear all of your thoughts on American Gods. There will be a post dedicated to this episode up on SnarkSquad.com. You can also sign up to join our community on patreon.com/SnarkSquad. There you can find polls, live hangouts, and other bonus content. You can find us on Twitter at @Snark_squad. I am at My Name is Marines.
I am at Sweeney Says.
And I'm at She's So Mickey. And if you like me talking about death and gods boning, you should listen to Spirits. We're at Spirits Podcast on Twitter, or just search Spirits in your podcast player.
Thank you as always to Seth and Chin for the theme music that is playing us out right now. We will be back in your feed next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.